Bibi Netanyahu, frankly, the Israeli prime minister is unhinged, in my view, in terms of what he's doing, both in Gaza. He has really not prioritized the hostage and prisoner releases. He is hell bent on continuing military operations. He's called for total victory in Gaza, which his own military has said there's no such thing as total victory, but they have very effectively degraded Hamas's military capabilities. But Hamas is there. It's also a political movement. And now he's turned his attention to the north to continue the fighting. And let me end with just this. I think Netanyahu is looking at the American elections on November 5th. He wants to know who the next president is going to be, and he will change his tactics accordingly.
Let's look at what's going on more widely, starting on the Lebanese border and welcoming Zach Anders, who is on the line now live from Kiryat Shmona. Hello to you, Zach.
Good evening, John.
Welcome as always, Zach. Zach, the Israeli leadership now talking, aren't they, of fighting until victory is achieved against Hezbollah. It does look as if those ceasefire calls have been rejected out of hand.
And, we had a period last night where there was 18 hours, 15 minutes without a registered Hezbollah attack in that window. There was a great amount of hope that potentially behind the scenes there was diplomatic efforts that were succeeding. On the other hand, this could be looked at it both ways because the IDF sources I've been speaking to are telling me, no, it's because we've degraded Hezbollah's ability to launch these attacks so successfully. That's why there was such a long period overnight. And as we were having some of those conversations, Hezbollah launched an attack at 10 a.m., some 45 rockets. So that essentially to us was telling us that diplomacy is still, whatever is taking shape right now, that from what we know, no direct talks are taking place between any of the parties involved here, primarily the United States, directly to Hezbollah. Apparently this, from what I have learned, is being made through mediators trying to get Hezbollah some of these messages and assurances from the United States. But of course, Netanyahu throwing cold water on everything this morning. He kind of chastised the Israeli media, too, for even running with some of these ceasefire talk points. He said, quote, "The news about a ceasefire is incorrect. This is an American-French proposal to which the prime minister did not even respond. The prime minister instructed the IDF to continue fighting with full force."
Right. So the President Biden has been defied. He's arguably been rather embarrassed. And where you are, near the border there, Zach, what has been happening? I've seen the reports of an Israeli general telling the forces there to be ready to cross into hostile territory, and there's been movement, there's been massing of troops. Can you tell me what's been going on?
Well, within the last 5 minutes, we just had a rocket attack that sounded for an area about 10 miles to our south. We could see at least 20 interceptions from the Iron Dome, the Israeli air defenses. And in our location here in Kiryat Shmona, rewind back to 2006. Where did Israel first enter into invade sovereign Lebanese territory? Well, they came up through the Galilee and through the less mountainous terrain. This is where today, and I've been covering up here in Kiryat Shmona for the last 11 months, being on location here. Today, I have noticed a slight increase in the number of troops that are in the city. This is an evacuated city. And we have noticed that there's been a change in the kind of equipment that's up here. I'm noticing field ambulances, these Humvees, American Humvees that are converted to military ambulances with the Star of David across the side of these, and a lot of military Humvees are on the road with us. A lot of the images online that people are sharing are of these tank convoys that people say, oh, there's an imminent invasion underway. There's an entire tank brigade that has been stationed up here in the north, never deployed down into Gaza. So the force level here was already pretty sizable. I'm only noticing a slight increase in the number of troops and some of the more specialized equipment that you would expect to see, the different pieces of an invasion plan, like those ambulances and those fuel trucks.
Right, so they look ready to cross the border. They look ready to invade, and now we just watch and wait. Zach, I know you were going to be talking to military leaders there where you are. As and when it comes to an invasion, is the belief in the Israeli ranks that it could be possible to achieve a quick win or anything like it?
Oh, absolutely not. No way. No. The idea is, if this is going to be an invasion into southern Lebanon, this is going to last longer than a campaign in Gaza if the goal here is to achieve war aims. Go back again to 2006. Israeli war aims were not met at the time. The war aims there were to push Hezbollah above the Litani River that was later enforced by UNSC 1701. Nations around the world came together, pressured Lebanon and Hezbollah to create a demilitarized zone. UNIFIL, United Nations peacekeepers, sent some 10,000 troops that have stayed in that zone, that buffer zone, since 2006 for more than a decade. The goal of that war was to demilitarize Hezbollah in this zone. Since that time, they have built an expansive tunnel network that has been documented. Hezbollah themselves, unlike Hamas in Gaza, they've actually allowed journalists to go and tour some of these tunnels with them over the years. If it was to be, okay, say you have the same war aims as 2006 to create this buffer, go about 20 miles north to the Litani River. There's no way that a campaign at this stage, given how dug in Hezbollah has become, let alone they've had a year now to prepare. If they weren't prepared before October 7th, every day after October 7th, they've been doubling their efforts to reinforce and militarize southern Lebanon to prepare for an invasion. Saeed Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, just in his last speech saying, welcome to southern Lebanon. You will be falling into a trap. We cannot wait, or we welcome your mistake coming into southern Lebanon.
All right, Zach Adders at the Lebanese border. Thank you so much, Zach. Let's hopefully keep in touch as this story unwinds. Now, let me welcome now to the program, a very warm welcome to Ambassador Djerejian, former United States ambassador to Israel. Hello to you, Ambassador.
I'm fine. Good to be with you.
Thank you for joining us. So the news that that the Israeli leadership seemed to have turned a deaf ear to those appeals from Joe Biden and other leaders for a ceasefire. First of all, do you find that at all surprising?
No, I think we've seen a clear pattern here, starting with the crisis in Gaza, whereby President Biden embraced Prime Minister Netanyahu right after the October 7th attacks on Israeli targets, promising and following up on full support for Israel's right to defend itself. But then as the war in Gaza continued with the massive Israeli retaliation against the targets in Gaza and the humanitarian disaster that has been created there, the U.S. administration, Biden's administration, started to urge caution on Netanyahu to limit the carnage and really get to a ceasefire, release of the hostages and exchange of Palestinian prisoners, and then the next step to start transitioning Gaza to a point whereby in the future some efforts can be made to resolve the conflict peacefully. All of that Netanyahu has really shunned. He has gone against the advice of a president who has given Israel full support, and now he's doing the same thing in the north. We have many commentators have said that if the Gaza crisis is not resolved in a timely manner, the war can expand to Israel's northern border with Lebanon and Hezbollah. That is what we're witnessing now.
Right. So let's then pick up the thread right there today. We look as if we are heading into very possibly a land invasion into Lebanon. The bombardment from the air continues. What are your fears on how that crisis, that conflict may develop, may escalate from here?
Well, if history is any lesson, Israel's experience in military operations in Lebanon is not a brilliant one. In 1982, they invaded southern Lebanon. The Israeli actions led to the creation of Hezbollah as a militant Shiite group that is the most prominent political voice in Lebanon. So that then Israel got embedded in Lebanon, and it had to extricate itself 20 years later without any real quote-unquote victory. And then we had the war in 2006, when Hezbollah captured a couple of Israeli soldiers across the border, and that led to a short but very brutal military confrontation. And again, the situation was frozen on the border, and Hezbollah ever since has now, since 2006, has been building up its capacities, especially its missile and rocket capacities. It is a much more powerful force now than it was before. So, to your point, if Israel is considering any type of massive land invasion of southern Lebanon again to push Hezbollah beyond the Litani River, it's going to be another march of folly. And what I would suspect more, how can I put it, expert view of what Israel can do is perhaps some special operations, military incursions to degrade specific targets of Hezbollah across the border, but not a massive land invasion. If we see a massive land invasion, then we're going to see a wider war in the Middle East.
Okay, so look, before we look at the question of a wider war beyond these borders, given what happened the other day, the other week, where we saw, well, key Hezbollah personnel injured and killed by those booby trap belt pages, and then we've been seeing targeted aerial assaults on key Hezbollah positions and aimed again at Hezbollah commanders. How far do you think that has degraded Hezbollah's capability? Do they pose the same threat, given that they do have, 100,000 or so or more men at arms and over 100,000 rockets and missiles?
Yeah, as you stated, I think the data that we have that's been made public by various intelligence agencies is that Hezbollah's manpower, militant forces, is anything between 100 and 100,000 plus militants, soldiers, if you will. So therefore, the numbers are still in Hezbollah's favor. There's no question that Israel's very successful tactical victory on the pagers has dented Hezbollah's capabilities for communications amongst its personnel. But Hezbollah is still a major force to contend with. And therefore, one should not underestimate that despite the tactical victories of Israel's efforts on the pagers and the walkie-talkies and its subsequent military strikes in Beirut and in the south, Hezbollah still has massive capabilities. What's really interesting here also is the role of Iran. Iran does not want an expanded war in the Middle East. It does not want to get engaged into a military confrontation direct with Israel. And basically, Iran looks at Hezbollah that if ever the Israelis decided to attack Iran, for example, nuclear sites, that they would like to keep the Hezbollah card in their hands to then unleash Hezbollah's potential against Israel in terms of retaliation against a direct attack on Iran. What Iran is witnessing now is the conflict is localized to the Levant between Israel and Lebanon, Israel and Palestine. I think that they're quite comfortable in their own strategic thinking that the war in Gaza and the war in Lebanon is really basically degrading Israel's capabilities and causing Israel to become more alienated in the international community. So the Iranians are quite comfortable in allowing this situation to fester, but they do not want a larger war. The United States, the Europeans do not want a larger war. And there are groups in Israel that don't want a larger war. But Bibi Netanyahu, frankly, the Israeli prime minister is unhinged, in my view, in terms of what he's doing, both in Gaza. He has really not prioritized the hostage and prisoner releases. He is hell-bent on continuing military operations. He's called for total victory in Gaza, which his own military has said there's no such thing as total victory, but they have very effectively degraded Hamas's military capabilities. But Hamas is there. It's also a political movement. And now he's turned his attention to the north to continue the fighting. And let me end with just this. I think Netanyahu is looking at the American elections on November 5th. He wants to know who the next president is going to be, and he will change his tactics accordingly.
Okay, you express yourself very clearly and very bluntly. Thank you, Ambassador.